Robert Young, and this is the third video. This is going to be on recession indicators, what my team and I look at to try to determine if the economy is moving into a recession, and of course take preemptive steps to take advantage of that. Because remember, in the second video, I told you there are places you can invest during a recession and make money. Also, we want to make sure we preserve wealth. Again, just a real quick recap, this is not an investment advice. This is not a trading strategy. Legal says I have to remind you that this does go out to people that we hope become part of our family one day, that we've met in the past, in fact, it also goes out to participants in our corporate pension plans, and so that they can utilize this information hopefully to better educate themselves on investments, as well as put together a strategy in their own 401k portfolio or defined benefit plan. And then finally, our friends and family that are with us now, and just give you an idea of what our thought process is in preparing your investment strategy. So what I want to do is I want to kind of give you a big macro view on the things that we look at for to determine if we're going into a recession. Now, first thing, we do look at yield curves. And why yield curves? Well, we look typically in a standard yield, you get paid less to tie your money up in a U.S. Treasury bond than you do if you give it to the federal government a little bit longer. So in other words, if you give it for 3 months or 2 years, you should be getting paid less than if you give it for 10, 20, or 30 years. All right? Yield curve inverts, you actually make more giving the government your money for a shorter period of time than you would for the longer period of 10, 20, or 30 years. Some news people and Yahoo Finance and others have determined that a yield curve inversion has occurred, and in fact one has, and because of that we're heading into a recession within the next 12 months. And you know, that's just an impossible way to look at it, because it's one factor in a multitude of factors. I'm going to give you what we look at to get a clearer picture of the overall health of the economy. Are we going up, or are we going down? Right. So that being said, very quick class on yield curves. So right now the 3-month yield is 2.16%. Now this is usually based up against a 10-year bond. So the 10-year is paying 2.09. In other words, it pays you a little bit more to give your money to the government for 3 months versus 10 years. So just like going to a bank, what if you gave your money to a bank for 6 months and you earned 2%, or you gave it to them for 5 years, they give you 3%. Well, you'd probably be tempted for the 5 years, so it depends if you don't need the money. But in this case, it's the exact opposite. 6 months will pay you 3%, or 5 years 2%. Well, why would I lock in my money for that longer period of time? Remember what I said in video 2. We're not talking about people that buy $10,000 worth of this. We're talking about countries and companies that put $100 million away. That little bit of difference makes a big difference to them. Some people look at the 2-year and 10-year, and the 2-year is paying 1.83, and the 10 is 2.09 still, right, from 30 seconds ago. Meaning, you get paid exactly the way you would expect. You get paid less on shorter, more on longer. So if yield curve inversion, you could find a yield curve inversion all you want if you look at enough of the differences. That is why to make a blanket statement that a yield curve inversion has occurred, and if you don't understand what tends to happen, it tends to happen because banks make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. They look at this and they say, you know what, we're going to stop lending or reduce our lending and constrict it, and as a result of that, it tends to constrict growth in the economy. That's a simple fact right there. So what do we look at? We actually look at the Fed fund rate, and currently it's 2.50. And we look at that and compare it to all of the yields available, and the 30-year is paying 2.64. So that it actually pays you more to lock in your money for longer. Well, why is that important? Because our data our historic data overview suggests that it is really the Fed fund rate compared to the total yields available that is the determinant of when a recession is going to occur. And when there is an inversion, when it pays you less, the Fed fund rate is higher than any other yield from the 3-month out to the 30-year, then a recession is on the horizon. And what's the time period? 10 months. His average time period is from that inversion, that moment, 10 months before we get to the peak of the market. Remember we said in video 2, peak of the market, 10 months to about an 18% gain in the stock market. So the clock is ticking. We hit the stopwatch, 10 months, we can expect about a 18% gain on average in the market. What's the market? Yep, S&P 500. Then it gets to the peak, then it starts to slide down. The economy starts sliding down. What does the market do? Correlates. It starts going down. I'll explain in video 2. Go back and watch that. How much? You may recall, 20 to 40%. That's why we track it, because then we can determine, okay, now we need to adjust our investment strategy, and where do we go to be defensive, or let's just stay in cash for a while. Then once you feel like we're at the bottom, let's move into the market. So if it's just not one thing, Robert, what do you look at? Well, it's very simple. There are 3 additional points we look at, and then some supplemental points. We look at the ISM, the manufacturing index, and its median point is 50. Anything above 50 is growth. If it's 50 or below, it's showing a contraction in the market. Right now we're at 51.7. It has been contracting a little bit each month. And what that is just it's an interview with CEOs, presidents of corporations, buyers. What's the sentiment? What's happening in your sector? Are you spending more for goods? Are you stockpiling? Are you reducing inventories? What's going on? It's compiled each month, and it's put out as it's calculated into a number. So we look at that. We look at unemployment. All right, is it growing or is it shrinking? Right, it's 3.7%. It's been 3.7 for a while. So right, we have unemployment is fairly steady. Not a lot of people losing their jobs and filing for unemployment. Look at the Fed fund rate, of course. And then finally, I take a look at what the beige book is. It's put out 8 times a year. It's every governor, every Federal Reserve governor in their sector of the country puts together these books, all this data telling us what's going on in their area. And is there growth? Is there contracting? And this is the same data that they then use when they meet to sit with a chairman and determine, should we cut rates, interest rates, or should we raise interest rates? So that's it. Those are really the 3 main things that we look at each month. And then the 4th is sort of the beige book, sort of an overview, which is just lovely reading. But then there's some other things. There's some supplemental stuff, just sort of triggers, if you will. Look at light truck sales. I look at average total number of miles driven by in transports. Look at building permits, not housing permits, but big commercial building permits. Also look at copper, and why? Well, copper's in everything. Right? It's in semiconductors, it's in electronics, it's in your car, it's everywhere. It's in roofing material. So is it being bought or is it not being purchased? And if it's being bought and used, then what does that tell me? Well, it tells me that things are being produced and sold. And then I look at oil. Right? Is oil being used, or is oil supply building up because people aren't using as much oil, which of course translates to all these other things you can imagine. So those are the things we look at. We build a picture, and then we sort of track it. And in particular, though, it is the Fed fund rate. It's the ISM report, and it is unemployment that are 3 key sort of tips of the spear that we look at to determine, are we moving into something? And then we do, of course, have our sort of trigger moment where we say, okay, all these things have come together. Now we think there's about a 10-month run for the market. Market's what? The S&P 500. And then we believe we're going to slide pretty much starting 3 months after that into recession, and we start to build out accordingly. So that's it. Just a big macro picture of what we look at to try to protect your money, try to grow your money to our best of our ability. And also want you to be able to take this information. If you have any questions, please reach out anytime. I can certainly go a little bit more in depth. I'll certainly give you ideas where to go to get this information. Or you can just simply read my newsletter or watch the video. That's it. Hope you found this interesting. Hope you found it beneficial. And any questions, please reach out anytime. And thank you very much for the opportunity to work together.